You're listening to the 14th source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your two overeducated, codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses. In the episode for Friday, December 17th, 2021. It is frighteningly close to the end of December, even though we're just kind of in the middle of it. And that bothers me. Because 2021 is over?
Yeah. I hate to break it to you.
Yeah, it's like, no, last year was 2019.
I guess time flies when you're not having fun.
Apparently, or time flies when you're stuck in one place doing the same thing over and over every day for the rest of time.
Forever. Yeah.
Actually, I can't be complaining about that more. Like, not to get off topic here. Believe it or not, dear listeners, both Andrew and I have day jobs. And I teach, and next semester I will be going back onto campus to teach. And I'm a little nervous about it just because the world is still a scary place. But I am comforted by the fact that my university does has a vaccine mandate or weekly or daily testing, if not that for some reason.
Yeah.
And of course, teaching while masked and all that stuff. So it's probably one of the more safer places to be if you're going to do a daily job. But it couldn't come soon enough because I was done teaching the way I have been teaching for the last 2 years, basically. But yeah, so the end of the year for me also brings a lot of change coming forward. So it's kind of exciting, kind of scary. It actually feels like something is going, like, that I'm not going to be optimistic and say things are on the rise. Things are getting better, but it's definitely going to be different than it was before, which is interesting to look back when we started this whole thing. So I actually did go back and listen to, not the whole episodes, but like there's been a couple points where I went back and listened to our episodes when this whole thing started. And it's just like, the wide-eyed just confusion of it all and going like, wow, this is weird, but
right. But it is weird.
Things are changing, hopefully not getting worse.
Hopefully we can do our best. It's and I've been back to work in real life since September, basically. Wow. And similar to what you described, everyone's mostly vaccinated or they're getting tested every week and all sorts of stuff.
Right.
But it's still it's still a weird situation because like to a certain extent there's this feeling that things haven't changed, right?
Yeah.
Things have changed, but like there's still, what is it they say that just recently the United States surpassed 800,000 people have died from this COVID.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, that's a lot of people. And then you think about it like, oh shit, that's a lot of people,
Yeah. And that's just confirmed.
Well, it's just there's a lot of don't get me wrong. There's a lot of like complexity to what that means and in both how it's underreported and not overreported, but like there's but either way, man, shit's real. Like
yeah.
But anyway, that was uplifting.
Well, no, I mean, there's an interesting thing that comes with that. I think the uneasiness that you're kind of hinting at is this. And that's one of the kind of more academic angles I want to take when going back to campus next semester is like, there's a part of me, and I'm sure a lot of people are acting this way. It's like, oh, let's get back to normal. But like, we've been home for 2 years. Like, nothing's normal anymore, right? Mm-hmm. And so the nice thing that has kind of, especially for nerdy people like you and I, that has kept us anchored, grounded, hopefully, optimistic, perhaps, or at least had us escape the dreariness and pessimism of everyday life, has been nerdy and geeky things that we like to partake in, whether it's games, movies, comics, books, music, whatever. And so with that in mind, Andrew, we're going to talk about our respective Weeks in Geek this week. It's been a while since we've done a Week in Geek episode, actually. So, Andrew, if you don't mind starting, what was your Week in Geek like this week?
this last 3 months.
Right.
So there's a lot I could talk about. I'm going to do a little shout out. I did buy some comic books. I bought United States of Captain America, volumes 2 through 5. Or is it 2 through 6? I forget. Basically, the whole run except for the first book, because I was too late, apparently. So this is
issues 2 through 6.
Or issues, yeah. Yes. Sorry, I used the wrong words. I tell the story because this is the first time I've ever gone out and bought issues of comics. The first and last time I've ever bought issues of comics, just because having never done it, not knowing that when it comes out is actually already too late to buy. Sometimes,
right. Sometimes, yeah.
Depending on the book, and this was one where, yes, I went in, the week it came out, and they're like, oh, we're out. They may reprint it. You can get your name on the list, and right. you could sign up to have a drop box or a pull box or a tab box or pull tabs or whatever it is.
Yep, pull tabs.
So I did,
exactly right.
And I got everything but the first issue. But then I'm like, well, shucks. And I keep being, Dan, you convinced me I'd just read it online. I just haven't gotten to it yet. But that was my fun story of Andrew gets into and gets out of buying comics.
Right. Well, and that's something that's been exacerbated by the pandemic. With paper shortages and stuff like that. Image Comics within the last couple of months announced that until the supply chain, not the blockchain, but the supply chain gets sort of normalized again, they're not doing any second printings of any issues with popular, because like you said, books sell out real quickly in some cases. Like, well, we can't afford it and we can't guarantee that we can get enough out there. So and I think it's only a matter of time when maybe floppies go fully digital, and the only print versions we get are trades. But that's just me throwing that in there because the pandemic has impacted not only comic sales but comic availability, as you might have experienced, despite it being also a popular issue.
So that was my fun little interlude. But the other thing is, speaking of comic book characters, I have been watching television, and I'm not going to talk about the big fancy new comic book based show Hawkeye. I'm not going to, because that's actually one where I want you to talk about it.
Yes.
Or I want you to watch it, and then we can talk about it together.
I will be watching it, yes.
Whereas I'm going to talk about all the other dumpster fire comic book shows that I watch.
So you're talking about Hitmonkey?
No, I didn't see that one. That's where I finally just said, you know what, I don't actually want to watch it. No, I'm talking about the DC CW verse, which the one thing I will say, so this is the DC CW verse, which includes Arrow, The Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, Supergirl, Batwoman, other random ass shit. And it's since in the last year and a half, it's gotten kind of disjoint because not only are some shows wrapping up, Black Lightning ended last year, Supergirl just ended, but also because of the pandemic, they all got kind of out of sync and all kind of had to struggle to figure out, where they're at. For example, Supergirl and The Flash last year ended early, basically. Like, they didn't finish their season. And then I believe Supergirl, their next season, they started late and then just went late. Like, they didn't finish the season until into another show's next season. Like, the whole thing is really weird. But I've been watching these shows. So they're all over the place, right? We have, the shows kind of out of sync with each other. There was never, whatever big crossover they were planning for the previous year never happened. Now that they're in the next year, like kind of the year after the pandemic started or whatever, right? Because the pandemic starts in March of 2020. They had the fall season that started at the end of 2020, and then they went, or at least they had some of the shows had a season, and now they're in 2021. Anyway, right. So
and they have full season. Well, most of them except for Legends has like full.
Well, they're all over the place now.
Oh, okay. Did they take mid-season breaks at all?
Again, what I mean to say is they're all over the place.
Okay, sure, fair.
So like, the big thing is that there isn't even, where it used to be they all started in fall and they all, now it's just like, nope, whatever showed up, like, right. Whoever got their shit done got put on the TV.
You're like, Dan, you're not listening. They're all over.
Well, because like I said, Supergirl just ended their 2021 season like a month ago.
Oh, wow.
Legends of Tomorrow started their 2021-2022 season 3 weeks prior to Supergirl finishing. Flash
man.
just, it really is this kind of like, they're just figuring it out. Whatever, man.
It's like no hopes of doing any kind of crossover stuff really at this point anymore.
No. So anyway, none at all. So I've been watching it, watching these shows. And this is actually kind of timing because the 5-part Flash not crossover Armageddon just ended this week. So the Flash, they started their season with a 5-part 5-part episode, and they I call it a not crossover because it featured actors from other shows. So it had the fella that plays Black Lightning. He's in an episode. Brandon Routh was in it as Ray Palmer, the Atom. He was in an episode or two. The woman who plays Alex Danvers in Supergirl, that's Supergirl's human sister, she was in an episode or two. So they kind of just pulled characters from all the other shows, but only, in some cases, like real auxiliary characters, right?
Right. It was all contained within the Flash. It wasn't like
within the context of the Flash. Yeah.
Right.
However, it was, starring the actor that played Vincent Van Gogh in Doctor Who, which was just like, what? Why do I recognize this guy? And he played kind of the villain, which was some alien with an eyeball in his head. And so it was a 5-part show, 5-part series, and and I will also say that at the same time, Legends of Tomorrow, which is the most bananas show they're doing, it started its 7th or 6th season a few weeks prior. Okay. And I'm to the point where it's like, what a contrast. Okay. Legends of Tomorrow is a show that was originally about the first season was kind of dumb, but it was about these time traveling misfits who kind of fix time anomalies, except they kind of make them too, right? Because they're misfits. And it's, in its current season, the whole premise is they get stuck in the 20s because apparently a version of their time ship shows up and blows up their time ship. And that's how the season starts. And you're like, what? Right? Okay. And it's like just weird, kind of zany. All the characters are mostly just people. Like there's a few superpowers, but it's not that out of control, and they're just having their weird zany time travel fun. Contrast with the Flash, which is this 5-part, oh my gosh, the Flash is going to destroy the future, so this guy comes back in time to stop him, and everything's kind of grim, and oh my gosh, and whatever. It's just such a contrast, and and it's like I'm not saying I don't like the DCCW verse. I'm not saying I like it, but boy, oh boy, I'm just gonna say it. Maybe the Flash is a show that as they're in season 8, I think maybe they just need to let the Flash stop running. Rest, Barry, rest.
No plans on that.
Oh, I don't know. I don't think so. Yeah. I don't know if they announced this is the last season. So with Supergirl, they at the previous season they said, "Oh, this is the last one."
Right.
I think what I'm saying is, for me, is that while there's still aspects of these shows that I enjoy, there is a lot of just kind of like, okay, this is a bit of a bear, there's like, all right, man, you gotta really dig in this muck to find the diamonds.
Well, the thing is, this could actually be helpful for you and just your pocketbook and your sanity. It's like with the pandemic sort of severing the tie that connected all these shows in some shape or form, where you had to watch all of them to understand the context and to enjoy, in a lot of ways, the big, fuck all crossover. With that kind of out the window, you could if you just want to watch Legends of Tomorrow.
Right. Well, that's actually the perspective I've kind of, all right, when they do Flash season 9, I can not do it,
right? You can get off that train.
It is shocking, and I almost wish, we could bring friend of the show Taylor on just so I could tell him, I'm sorry, dude, I don't think I like the Flash. I just don't. The character. I don't think I like the character. Well, just be, because it's a character. It's one of those weird things. It's like the Superman problem of like, wow, so what can't this guy do?
Right.
But then without necessarily, at least in my experience, without the charm of, Superman. And when I say that, I mean specifically a lot of the actors that have played Superman, right? Christopher Reeve, Brendan Routh, and even the new guy,
Geralt of Rivia,
Tyler Hoechlin or whatever his name is.
Oh, that too. Yeah.
No. Geralt of Rivia is not a good Superman. He's a good Geralt of Rivia. And in fact, he's a lot of good things, but Superman is not one of them. But I'm just like, so I think that's, it's just weird. Is someone like, I don't know. I think about people that watch like, I don't know, like a soap opera for a long time, and they're like, is there a point where like you're in like season 12 of Days of Our Lives and you're like, you know what, this has really jumped the shark, but you know what, I'm gonna keep watching it because I've committed this long, right? It's like it's that what is that, I forget what that's called, like you've put so much into it. No, it's not addiction. It's investment. It's like a gambling fallacy,
like the cost fallacy kind of thing.
You're too deep in that you can't stop now.
What is that? Yeah, there's a word for that. Yeah.
So I wonder if that's where I'm at with these shows.
Right. Well, here's hoping you feel confident enough to cut the cord on some of these. It sounds like for some of them they've cut the cord on you. So
and what I'll say is as I'm always shocked with DC's Legends of Tomorrow, is that show continues to, like, it doesn't take itself seriously, and it's not for everyone. Like, I don't want to say, oh, go out and watch it, everybody, but I think that show, once it figured out that it wasn't like its first season, it's trying to be another one of these big serious shows, and then they're like, you know what, that's actually not what we're here for. Let's be silly, and they also have a large rotating cast where so at this point in season 7, I think, or 6, 7, they only have one person that was in the first season.
Oh wow.
Right, everyone else has rotated out. And then some have rotated in, some have rotated in and out, and they're also not afraid to just be stupid. I say that because in the second or third season they introduced a character, the Vixen. She was she would do some anamorphic. She would kind of like take on aspects of animals. So they had that character, and then I guess that character was like, okay, this character's played out, and then they introduced the same actress as a different character.
Oh, nice.
Right, they did that, and you're like, this is kind of, but then it worked, right? And then she went on for another 2 years, and she finally left the show. Matt Ryan, who played Constantine in the Constantine show, right? He shows up. He did that character for like 2 years, and finally his character left. Constantine leaves, and then now he's been introduced as just a different character. And again, to give you context of how this show works, when all the characters are meeting this new character played by Matt Ryan, they're like, God, he seems familiar, and everyone keeps listing a different person from the past that they think he looks like.
Nice.
Right, which I like, is this idea that the show.
Do any of them name Constantine?
I think finally someone does. Everyone's like, no, and it's the person who had like a romantic engagement with Constantine.
Nice.
And then they're like, no, he doesn't look like Constantine, right? And so like they're still just kind of, and the stories are ridiculous, but I think the second episode literally has them kill J. Edgar Hoover by accident, right?
Oops.
And then find another J. Edgar Hoover, and they're like, what? So it is a very silly show. It makes me think about what I like of these shows, but also I do now think about with Disney doing, Marvel doing shows, which I would argue that even when they're not at their best, they're all at least not fucking terrible. Right. They're not The Flash season 8. So yeah, it's a weird thing. Because of course I'm watching the Disney shows, I'm watching Star Wars, I'm watching Star Trek too. I would actually say, I think the one thing this has definitely made me think is that the DCCW shows are all still mostly, I think, doing 16 or 24 season blocks. Episode blocks, right? And that's changed a little bit because of the pandemic, but only because they had to, not because they realized maybe they should just do fucking 10.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Or 6 even.
Right. And that's the benefit that all the other, like, Star Wars, Marvel, even Star Trek, because Star Trek is Paramount Plus. What's the service now called?
Yeah, Paramount Plus.
It's exclusive to that. It doesn't air on TV at all, right?
I have no idea.
I don't think it does. What is TV? Believe it, there lots. It's still on. Believe it or not. Whereas the DCCW shows are strictly tied to a network and to that archaic system of budgeting and scheduling, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I think we're seeing kind of that model wearing very, very thin.
Now, the one thing I will say, with this Flash 5-part not crossover, is they do bring in characters from other shows, even like villains and some other stuff, and it makes me realize that they can bring, like, they have their own multiverse there, right?
Right.
Or universe, I'm not really sure.
Right.
They have enough that they could just start doing, mini shows or mini series, and it's to the point where I'm like, I wish they would, right?
Yeah.
Because
like
they have
do those big fuck off crossovers, right?
But also just do, like, here's a 6-part story about this character that, because they bring, for example, in the Flash episode, they bring back Brandon Routh, who'd been in Arrow as the Atom. He was then in Legends of Tomorrow as the Atom, and then he leaves that show in a very different place than he was when he started. And they bring him back, and there's a certain amount of, like, oh, he's still Brendan Routh, right? And he's still, there is a story there that they could do if they wanted to.
Well, he's also come back as Clark Kent, if I'm not mistaken.
He did for the one episode, and they could do that, right? Or they could do, there's a lot of things they could do with this world they've built. They could have, like, they introduced characters in Supergirl or in Arrow or these other shows, that they could have them show up and then kind of do cross casting, have, like, here's, different characters from different shows. And I think maybe probably what I appreciate about Legends of Tomorrow is that that's the show that had been doing that. Like, it was kind of like the dumping ground for characters. Right. The fact that season 2 or 3, the villains were the Reverse Flash, Evil Wizard Damien Dark, and John Barrowman. So it was like villains from other shows that, like, oh, you're now a rank 2 villain. Come to Legends of Tomorrow as the Legion of Doom.
So we got Reverse Flash, we got Evil Wizard, and then John Barrowman's just running around putting his dick on people's shoulders.
No.
Actually, that's not the villainy he was involved in.
It's funny because actually I was trying to think, like, I don't think he actually shot any arrows as the evil Malcolm Merlin. No, he was just John Barrowman. But yeah, so I think that's kind of my thought, though, that there is, they kind of have some stuff, and I think it's almost like they know they've got it, but for reasons of whatever format, they can't express it.
Right. So you said 2 shows ended this last year, Black Lightning and Supergirl. How, you don't have to go into details of the plot or anything like that, but just how do you feel they brought this show to the end, those shows to their end? Because I think up until this point, only Arrow has ended, right?
Yeah. Well, so Black Lightning ended in 2020.
Okay.
It was I think it ended, technically they stopped filming before the pandemic. They'd already finished it. Okay. I didn't get to it until a couple months into the pandemic. That show, so Black Lightning is a show that it was a little bit, kind of drama at times. But I actually thought it ended. It's the first show that, how do I put this? It ended on its feet. Like, it ended where it wanted to end.
Yeah.
Where Arrow felt like it just dragged on, right? It kept going way longer than it should have. And their last season was good because it was like the victory lap. But, like, seasons 5, 6, and 7, you're like, oof, guys, we could wrap this up, and
So I think the position flashes in now.
Right. So, like, what I mean is that Black Lightning, they started the show. And for those who don't know, it's his character Black Lightning, Jefferson Pierce, and his kind of the introductory villain you see is this his nemesis, basically, Tobias Whale, and that's who he starts with, and that's who he ends with. right?
Oh, cool.
So it becomes a 4-season, where and then the season 2 and 3 introduce other stuff, and not always the best, but like there's this idea that it starts with this guy, and Whale's always in the background. And then we have other stuff that relates more to his to Jefferson Pierce's character, his past, the origin of his power. But then it comes back to him finally confronting his nemesis and defeating him. Right. So I think that of all the DCCW shows, Blacklight, and arguably it started not being a DCCW show, but it's the show that I felt had the best overall story arc so far. The Arrow just kept going on, and Flash keeps going on. Supergirl is also a show that it just kind of kept going on.
Yeah. I mean, Black Lightning seemed to have the benefit of being only 4 seasons as well.
Right.
Like, not outstaying its welcome. And
there's nothing, and that's actually where I think there's nothing wrong with going really long, but you just have to realize that, like, and I mean, even like the Flash is to the point where they've cycled out quite a few of the cast. Or at least they've cycled in. Like there's been some rotation, but but because it's the Flash, you still have central characters that are still there, right? And you kind of can't do the show without them. Same with Arrow, right? It was about Oliver Queen. You just like even they kind of did the backdoor pilot of here's Arrow 2, and it was like, oh, and that didn't get picked up. And maybe it's because these shows are kind of star carriers in a way.
Right.
I mean, stars, they don't necessarily, they're not stars when they start, but if it comes, it's like Supernatural, right?
I was just thinking that.
Right. Although they did do that show for 700 years, like they couldn't do it without those two or three characters.
Yeah.
So anyway, I mean, I watched it. I'll be excited when they announce The Flash is ending. And what Superman started last year, it was great.
Right, yeah.
It has a season 2 coming. I think they've got something interesting there. Like I said, Legends of Tomorrow. If they just keep cycling out characters and just doing absurd shit, and again, and they made it clear they're not afraid to just do absurd shit, which is I think what makes the show kind of fun. So we'll see. I mean. It's a TV series. It's no Marvel Cinematic Universe, I assure you that.
Well, it's
neither marvelous nor cinematic.
But it is universe. It's so it's got that.
It does have that. Best 1 out of 3.
There we go. Well, cool.
But so that, I guess that was my months in geek. Dan, what about you?
I'm gonna keep it going with superhero stuff. But I will be talking about Marvel, but I will not be talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I'm not going to be talking about TV, I'm going to be talking about a video game. I have been playing, although briefly, because it's been a busy month or so as the semester wrapped up, a new video game from Eidos-Montréal. Eidos, I think, most well-known in gaming history for being the publishers of the original Tomb Raider. British company, I believe. Now owned by Squeenix.
British company based out of Montreal.
Right. Well, they have definitely expanded. And I've actually talked about Eidos-Montréal before. I talked about, actually, they made the 3rd Tomb Raider game in the rebooted Tomb Raider series, Shadow of the Tomb Raider.
Shadow of the
Tomb Raider, yeah. And it was lots of promise. Really fun game, but really did not... That's the one where, like, hey, this is about, native... Hispanic or native culture in South America. Let's hope they don't. Let's hope. And Lara, though, this white girl from Britain is going to go save them. It's like, oh, I don't know. And they don't really nail the landing. But that aside, it was a fun game to play. So they know how to make video games. But I actually want to talk about their newest game. And I guess, the other games that they were probably known for is they did pick up the Deus Ex series. From whoever was developing that before. But they've always kind of been like... Eidos-Montréal has always kind of been this underling of the studios that they have acquired. But I'm talking about their new game called Marvel's The Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh!
Yeah. Not based on the James Gunn movies. So it doesn't feature... Well... I mean, Rocket Raccoon looks like a raccoon. Like, I was going to say it doesn't feature their likenesses, but Groot looks like a tree, Rocket looks like a raccoon, Drax looks green, as does Gamora. But basically, so
Drax looks green?
Drax the Destroyer? Isn't he green and red? Well, I don't know. In this game,
I thought he was red. I guess.
In this game, he's green and red. And but no likenesses of the actors that portrayed those characters, and not even really going for voice matching at all.
I mean, it's so surprising that Chris Pratt couldn't, be the voice.
Right. He's
too busy being all the other voices.
Right, indeed. But the best way I can describe this game...
I'm a Star-Lord. I'm going to win.
It's a Star-Lord. Who? But what's interesting is, I wasn't really invested in this game. The trailers looked dumb. The previous Marvel game that Eidos... I guess the main... Who was it? Was it Eidos? No, it was Crystal Dynamics, also owned by Square, who also started the rebooted Tomb Raider franchise. They did an Avengers game for Square that was apparently terrible, and so I'm like, well, I don't particularly care. But reviews started coming out of this Guardians of the Galaxy game, and they were surprisingly good. I'm like, okay. I don't think it's been selling that well because I think it dropped maybe at the end of October, definitely at the latest, the beginning or middle of November. And by the beginning of December, disc copies were on sale for half price. So I'm like, well, I've heard good things. Might as well drop a good $25 on this. Let's see how it goes. And I've been playing. I've been maybe about 4 or 5 hours into it. And let's just say that I am pleasantly surprised. The best way to describe this game is that it's an action and adventure game. Not an action adventure game. It's an action and adventure game. And what I mean by that is it's a really bifurcated experience in terms of what they have you do in this game. So basically it's a single player narrative action game ultimately. Okay. You play as Star-Lord. You only control Star-Lord. And you have your team who's generally controlled by AI, right? But in combat scenarios and in puzzle scenarios, you can basically command your group to do specific moves. And in combat scenarios, once you start unlocking abilities, you can send in Drax, you can send in Rocket, and they can, if you choose the right moves for each of them at the right time, they can do combo, which does extra damage or staggers enemies even more, something like that. And like I said, when you're not in combat scenarios, there are often puzzle elements to the environments you're in. You're like, I need to get it, this there's a box I need to get into, but it's hanging. We need to get that box knocked down. There's a rock over there. You can have Drax pick up the rock and throw it at the box to have it fall to the ground and stuff like that. And each character has their own kind of abilities. You need to get across a chasm. Hey, you can try to call all your members to try to get across the chasm, but ultimately you pick Groot, who can make a little tree bridge across the chasm and stuff like that. It's cute in that regard. I find the combat to be kind of clunky, and it's really confusing because you're kind of, especially with the controller, you're kind of clawing the controller because all these button pushes and menus that you're bringing up by holding different shoulder buttons and whatnot. But the thing that stood out to me is everything that's not the combat. Even though they've done a lot of work with voice acting, and the writing's really good, in that these characters really feel, even though they're not, mimicking necessarily the characters from the movies, that's pretty close in any regard, because that's how the characters are in the comics. And I should say the characters look more like they did in the comics. But the one thing they're doing while you're playing, whether you're in combat or whether you're just walking around, is they're always talking to each other, and sort of not procedurally generated, but definitely sort of environmentally triggered and stuff like that. If I decide to, as Star-Lord, if we're walking somewhere and I decide, there's a room over here, and I'm going to go look for, currency or items, they'll start commenting of where the fuck did Star-Lord go? It's this guy, we got shit to do, Star-Lord. I'm like, okay, this is kind of cool. But that's only part of the game. The actual, the walking around, puzzle solving, and combat stuff. There's a whole other part of the game, which is actually a significant part of the game that I've played so far, which is, if that was the action part of the game, this is the adventure part of the game, where you're in your ship, And in between these big missions you go on, you just walk around your ship. You can talk to your peers. What is this? Am I a CEO? You're talking to your teammates. You are, and this also applies when you're on planets and stuff like that, is that there's a really, not complex, but it's a more developed than it should be dialogue system that's going on here, similar to what they do in something like Telltale games, where you're presented with a scenario, Drax and Rocket are fighting about what to do next, how to best pull off this heist, basically, that you're trying to do. And an option comes up where you get to choose who to side with. Or if they're fighting, a dialogue option can pop up where you're like, tell Rocket to calm down or tell Drax to calm down. Or you can say nothing at all. And in many situations, like in a Telltale game, it'll say, hey, Rocket's really pissed off that you chose Drax over him. To the point where I noticed it had at least a small impact. I don't know if it has larger implications down the line. Where, like, I wanted to solve this puzzle that I was at, and Rocket was the best choice to do that, but he wouldn't fucking do it because he was still fucking pissed off at me for choosing Drax over him or something like that, right? And so there's these weird dialogue moments and character growth moments that are intertwined in this action game that seem to have gameplay implications. So it's not just about shoot, get all the experience points and level up. It's like it's a team management game in a sense, going threaded throughout everything else. That was the kind of unexpected part. And the thing is, because it's written so well, because the voice acting is so good, that even though I'm not necessarily a guy that's really into action games, I like slower moments, I like indie games, I like games that do different things, that I'm finding these small moments, these moments where you're basically, as Star-Lord, you're like, who haven't I pissed off in a while? Balancing those moments and actually thinking about these characters as a team instead of just, Drax is the guy that staggers people, Gamera is the DPS person, and, Groot's the healer. Instead of thinking about them in that way, thinking about them as these characters that are trying to, that don't like each other in a lot of ways, try to have them get along, is a really fun and unexpected thing to find in a game about a Marvel franchise, right? And it's been a pleasant surprise. Well, and that's
kind of the charm of at least the movie, right? Guardians of the Galaxy. That it is this, kind of rainbow coalition of ne'er-do-wells.
Right.
And I think about it, having spent so much time talking about it, that's also very similar to DC's Legends of Tomorrow. These are just people that don't get along and they piss each other off, and then you see them. I can appreciate that, and
And it's cool because you think about it, like, I'm an X-Men fan, and like, I haven't really enjoyed any X-Men game. There have been good X-Men games like the Capcom fighting game and whatnot, but like, it always lacks something. And the thing is, especially for a lot of superheroes, especially team-based superhero franchises, like, it's a balance between the action and the soap opera, right? Mm-hmm. And I've never seen a game, at the very least, try to balance both, honestly, until this game. Because even like the last really, really good superhero game was Marvel's, the full title was Marvel's Spider-Man by Insomniac Games. It was a really good cinematic game, but like all the emotional stuff and like the good character growth stuff was told through cutscenes. And then when you were in control, you were Spider-Man flying around the fucking city and punching bad guys, right? Mm-hmm. This game is just, it's a bold choice just to like, hey, you love these characters, you like seeing them interact, be a part of that, as well as shooty shoot, jumpy jump, right? Mm-hmm. And it's cool. I should also say, one of the things they do pull from the movies is the esoteric vintage soundtrack that they use to very good effect. They have a nice collection of pop songs from the late 70s to the early 90s. And I should say, like, the origins of some of these characters are different. Spoiler alert, in the game, Drax killed Thanos. And so, like, it's not, even though it's pulling elements and sort of vibes from the movies, it's not trying to follow that narrative. Right. One of the nice things about the Guardians, or the charming things about the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, is the almost inappropriate use of pop songs in strange moments, right? It's like, oh, it's a high tense action scene, and all of a sudden, Angel in the Morning starts playing, or something like that, right? They do that here as well, and there's a really interesting. So they have the entire soundtrack available for your ship. And I found out that Twisted Sisters we're not going to take it's on the soundtrack. So I'm like, well, guess what song I'm playing every time we hit the ship? But there's a mechanic in there where during combat, if you build a meter to a certain point, you can basically call a huddle, where the action stops, and you basically in this weird netherverse where all the team comes up to you, and it's kind of like a weird adventure game moment in the middle of combat where the team rushes to you. They're all saying stuff. They're kind of giving you a hint of how they're feeling during this combat. They're like, oh man, this is really rough. I don't know if I can do it. Or they're like, this is awesome. We're kicking ass. And then you, as Star-Lord, are presented with two choices of like pep talks. And if you choose the right one, you go back into the combat with a boost, and all the character abilities, which are normally on cooldown timers, those timers are gone, so you can just like destroy everything in your path. But whatever choice you choose, they pull a random song from the soundtrack. And I think this is probably scripted, but the first time I did it, I give them the pep talk, and we go back to the combat, and what starts playing? Never Gonna Give You Up. I'm like, all right, I'm into this. But to close, just to kind of give you a sense of how effective the adventure game part of this game is, it comes down to how the game opens. And I guess, spoiler alert for how the game literally opens. The opening scene is that the game opens on the title screen, and it's just the character sitting around the ship. There's a random song playing from the soundtrack. When you start a new game, it fades in, and it's a first-person view, and you're Star-Lord at 13 years old, in probably what looks like between early to mid to late 80s. They're really pulling references from all over the place here. Just sitting on your bed at home in your basement bedroom, and music starts playing, this like 80s heavy metal music, and it's just this. He's sitting on his bed, and what you have in front of you is the liner notes for this new album you bought, and the album is by a band they made up for the game called Star-Lord, and this music starts playing, and apparently they wrote and recorded an entire 80s heavy metal album by this fake band Star-Lord. Like, they recorded 10 songs. Like, these are full songs. These are like 5-7 minutes long, with solos and intros and outros and sequencing. Like, what the fuck? And the thing is, the game opens with you looking at the lyrics, and you can zoom in, and you can read the lyrics, and you're just listening to the album, and it goes from one song to the next. And I'm like, that opening scene hit me so hard. Of like, that's what I did. And that's like, you don't have to be a heavy metal fan or anything like that, but just like getting an album, sitting down with your headphones on or whatever, and just reading the lyric sheet, looking at the artwork. And the room they had set up around him was my room as a kid. And for the first 20 minutes of this game, I didn't press a single button. I'm just sitting there just like, they nailed this vibe so hard to the point where maybe it's just the end of the semester or whatever hitting up on me too. I'm like getting emotional just being in this nostalgic moment, and like, this is the best game ever made, right? But like, you get up and you walk around, and like yeah, it was just like, okay, I know exactly what kind of kid this is. He's got his own guitar he's learning how to play. He's got the comic book he's making up on his table. He's got the video game system, like the system and the controllers on the ground, and the old CRT is up on a shelf. He's got RPG rule books laying out on another table, and it's like, and he's got a Tron poster on the wall. I'm like, yeah, yeah, and it's just such a good example of what you can do with video games and storytelling and character development, not telling you what this character is like, and having to read a bio screen. It's like, if this is a game about this character, the video games have a unique ability to actually put you in that role and give you all you need to know, especially if you're within that age group, I should say, right. Of knowing exactly what's going on. And the way they use those flashbacks back to when he turned 13 is incredibly powerful, and is way too much effort and polish and heart than a licensed game should have. So, man, I'm not that far into it, but it is charming as hell, even though it's a kind of a clunky game. I have a standard PlayStation 4 then playing it on. It is having problems keeping up, but that's okay. It's still playable, very playable. It just sounds like it's going to take off into the stratosphere. So, Guardians of the Galaxy, better than it should be, but I'm glad it exists. I'm really glad it exists. So if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page for this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page.
You can also find us on other social media, such as Twitter and Instagram. On Twitter, you can find us at our respective handles, which means you can find Andrew at Profound Dark and find me at Bethel. You can also find us on Instagram, where you can find Andrew at Profound Brick and me and my work at Bethel Comics.
While you're at our website at forallintents.net, you can also take a look at our YouTube page, which you can find by clicking on the link in the corner that says YouTube.
We used two tracks of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusae, the other is called District 4, and they're both written and performed by Kevin McLeod, the Clan McLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 5.0 by attribution license.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use, whether it's something like the Apple Podcast app or Spotify. No matter the service that you use, what would help us out even more would be to go to their storefront, leaving some sort of review, whether a text review or using the proprietary metric, will help spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms. Andrew, do you mind if we close talking about Star Trek just a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the new season of Discovery is on. It's been a real hoot, and that's what you want to talk about, right?
No. I've been watching The Next Generation, as I believe we've talked about on the show before. And the best part is, my wife is loving it as well. But we're in the beginning stages of season 3. Which, as most pop culture nerds know, the end of season 3 is what really put TNG on the map, right? Because the Borg does some dirty business. Spoilers.
for a 30-year-old TV show.
But this is the best part, and she doesn't listen to this show, so I don't care if I... So, when the Borg showed up in season 2, I'm like, oh shit, the Borg! And she looked at me like I was crazy. I'm like, the Borg! The Borg. And she's like, what is this?
Sounds Swedish?
Is this word supposed to mean something to me? Yeah, is that the new bookshelf we got at IKEA? I'm like, you don't know the Borg? And she's like, no. I'm like, oh, this is beautiful. And so as we head into season 3, I am so excited to see that go down, because it's like a story out of oral tradition for nerds, the end of season 3, right?
Well, and I think because although it wasn't the first time a big cliffhanger was done in television or anything like that, it was actually one of the, I think, really early instances of like a season ender cliffhang type show,
right?
In kind of sci-fi fantasy television,
right.
At least since the serials, right?
Yeah, indeed, yeah.
So it was a big deal. So it'll be, and it's also, even if you're watching it on streaming, it's still like a big what the fuck, because
right.
It is just like, oh, let's sit down and watch this show. Okay, boop boop, boop. And like, oh, what's going on? All of a sudden you're like, oh, what? I mean, I've told this story several times, but I actually still remember where I was when I watched it.
No, me too, yeah.
Because I was, probably the only reason I remember is because we were in Lompoc, California.
Oh, a beautiful Lompoc.
At a hotel, because my mother was meeting some coworkers like for the weekend, and my brother and father and I went with them. With my mother, and the idea is that we had dinner plans, and we found out that the local, because Star Trek was in syndication, we found out that the local, whatever the affiliate that was, or whatever channel was showing Star Trek in Lompoc that day was like, oh, it's at this time. Oh shit, that runs right into the dinner time we have scheduled. So my father said like, well, we're gonna convince my mother we're gonna watch it, but my father was like, all right, we're gonna watch this, and I remember him saying, and when it gets to the end where like they're all standing around holding their dicks and the credits, whatever, we're gonna go to dinner with your mother, right? So this idea that we're thinking, oh, there's gonna be that little, that little scene at the end where they say like, oh, and what an interesting thing happened today,
Picard wakes up,
and instead we got that, we got Burr, and they're like. And it was like, well, I guess we're not going to dinner. No, we still went to dinner, but
of course, yeah.
It was just such a shock.
Yeah.
So I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too, and I hope I'm not annoying you by every time we sit down to watch an episode of Star Trek, I tell you which episode we're watching.
No, it's fun because I get to look it up, and I've actually watched a few of them. Like as I've told you, so it's an interesting thing, and this is if you're a person that there's a show you really value, and you have a friend that's watching it kind of for the first time. It's a fun thing to have that, like, hey, I'm watching this episode. You're like, oh my gosh, that's the one where someone puts their pants on inside out. Like, yeah,
yep, that's a classic one actually.
Good old Wesley.
So until you're shocked by a cliffhanger season ender, dear listeners, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Major Asplund.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast.
I was thinking about that, like, just like as a teenager, I remember like Wednesday night or whatever, I just call a friend and we talk for 3 hours. I'm like, what the fuck? Just call people out of the blue and talk because we watched the new Highlander episode and we just want to talk about it.
Wait, we do that? That's what
I know, but not out of the blue. We schedule this. Yeah. I'm talking about like I'm gonna call Bill and see if he watched the new Highlander episode, and I'm gonna draw while we talk. I'm like, okay, that was a thing I did. Now I get scared whenever the phone rings.
I was always scared of the phone. That's just me. No, that's just trauma. That's why I don't like calling people, man.
Yeah.
Even now, when like I mostly know who's on the other end, I still don't much like it.
Yeah. Okay, I'll leave then. It's basically, since it's all like telekinesis, it's just two guys staring at each other while shit flies around them. I'm like, yeah, that's fighting. No guns needed here, sir. They're trying to get to Shell Beach.
Well, that was the thing. I still to this day, like, they're trying to get to Shell Beach. Like, I've been there. Don't bother.
I'm like, Pismo's probably got more stuff going on if you want to check that out. Shell Beach is just a community. Or Avila, if you want to go to the secret one, that's where the naked beach is. What are you talking about this fine evening for your wig?
Your butt.
Oh, okay, I'll write that down. You found my blog.